We are here to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, which was filmed in Germany. Paris, was that your first time traveling internationally and spending an extended period of time in a country foreign to you?
Yes, it was. It was 1970, and I'd never been out of the country before, actually. And so, yeah, it was my first trip to Germany, first trip to Europe.
You eventually worked in the world of travel agencies for a bit and have also spent a lot of time traveling recreationally. So, was the experience of filming Willy Wonka in Germany what first sparked that interest in exploring the world?
I've wondered that question myself. You're right. I have traveled around a lot. I've been to 62 countries and various on 6 continents. Some crazy places like the Amazon jungle and Sahara Desert and Mount Everest Base Camp and Borneo and just all sorts of crazy places. Yeah, I remember when I was done shooting, I had to go back to New York to go be in a Broadway show called The Rothschilds. And my mother and 2 sisters traveled around Europe for a few weeks. And I was always like, ah. And so I wonder, when I got out of college, I really wanted to travel more. And I wonder if that might have been true, what you said, where maybe the travel that I did there and then not being able to go with them afterwards maybe gave me the travel bug. Yeah, so there could be something there.
Or maybe you were just destined to love traveling because your name is Paris.
Yes, I remember the first time I went to Paris and the first time I touched the Eiffel Tower. And, I felt like had some sort of a connection there.
Would you say that having this really diverse life experience of visiting all these places got you through the hardships of the previous year we've all just experienced together? Because I think there were probably a lot of people who went into lockdown feeling like, I really wish I had traveled more. I really wish I had seen more of the world. But you've experienced and seen so much of the world, and not a lot of people can say that.
I mean, yes and no. I do love travel, and I canceled a trip to Greece and Croatia and the Mediterranean for when this happened. So, like everybody, I felt the same sort of, feeling that I wish that I'd been able to continue to do that. But on the other hand, I've lived my life in a way where I tried to do as much of the travel as I could early, so that I wouldn't regret later on. Just sort of what you're saying, not even to do with the pandemic, just to do with life and death, that you really want to, while you can enjoy it, go, like, people always find excuses to not travel. I can't get away from work. I mean, that's a pretty good one if you're going to lose your job, right? Or I just, I don't have the motivation. I'm comfortable at home, or, they find it. And I never have regretted any of the time that I've traveled. I always recommend to people that they try to, find the gumption to do it, because, and I think that, you're a lot younger than I am. I think that the culture is shifting in this direction also. I think that people are moving towards a more experiential mindset, and less of one to do with, like, I'm going to, collect a bunch of things, a library of things. Instead, they're going out and experiencing things and gathering memories, rather than stuff as much.
In rewatching Willy Wonka to prepare for this interview, I found that there were a lot of jokes that I appreciate a lot more now than I did when watching the film as a child. So did you come to develop a similar appreciation for the film as you grew older?
Yes, I agree with you. There are things for kids and there are things for adults and everything in between. There are Shakespearean references. There's the joke about Rachmaninoff, which is not that, it's Mozart, I think. And sure, I mean, I've watched it at every stage. So as you might imagine, I've seen it a bunch of times. So I got the references as a kid, and I got other references as an adult. And, I keep seeing new things about it. They've got a 4K release now. So the technology leads you to even better see the textures of the clothing and the textures of the cobblestones and the bubbles and the things that are in there, the pure imagination room. They brought me over to Burbank to see what they've done. And I got to talk to the colorist for a while who actually did the work on it. And yeah, it's pretty impressive. I mean, you think that you've seen it as good as you can see it, and then they ramp it up a notch, they add some more bits, and there it is even clearer. So yeah, it's just, in a sense, I won't say it keeps getting better, but it gets more and more realistic every time. It looked almost 3D this time.
Is it true that you really wanted to have your own song for Mike Teevee, just like Veruca Salt got her own song?
Yeah, I was on Broadway when I was 8, and again when I was 11. And so 11 through, I did the first national tour of the Rothschilds. So like 11 to 14, I was doing a Broadway show. So I was able to sing, and they didn't have a song for me, but it wasn't really within my control. The closest I could do is sort of sing on the set in the hopes that someone would notice and then give me a song.
Yeah, I think I read something to that effect in an interview from one of your other co-stars. I forget which one it was, but someone was saying, oh yeah, he really wanted a song, so he was just singing on set trying to
That's true.
Convince
Where
them.
is Love? Where is Love from Oliver? That was my audition song, and I'm pretty sure that's the one I was singing on set.
That was what was in the interview that I read. So
well,
yeah.
There you go. This probably, we don't talk about it that much. So it's probably, that may have been years ago that interview was. I'm not sure.
I really like learning about the technical mechanics of how things get made. So can you explain how they achieved that one shot of Mike being held up when he's already been shrunk by his mother's fingers?
Sure. Styrofoam. They used a lot of styrofoam in this movie. So they sculpted 2 fingers out of styrofoam and covered them with white cloth so that they looked like the gloved fingers. Then they attached a flying rig, so like wires and a harness to them, and then dangled, put me in a harness and dangled me from there. So I'm like that, where are you taking me? And then they cut to the next thing. I have a funny picture of 2 German stagehands on whose shoulders I'm standing in between shots. And one of them is like smoking a cigarette and looking very bored. And it's just me standing on their shoulders. So it's kind of cute. It gives you a sense of, what they had to go through to get me to do it.
Another thing I learned when researching was that you've visited fan conventions for over 20 years now, for people to be able to meet you as, one of the kids from this movie. So that industry used to be more niche, but has now sort of exploded into mainstream popularity. So
yeah.
What got you into going to these conventions, and what do you enjoy about attending them?
I haven't been going that much lately. And of course, this last year, not at all. So neither I nor any of the Wonka kids did anything in the 50th year. So that's a shame. Honestly, we thought we were going to have a big year convention-wise this year. So maybe what we're going to have to do is next year, be like, celebrate the 51st anniversary of Willy Wonka. And everybody will be like, oh, right, I guess I get it. I started doing them in 97, 98. And for a little while, I was doing them a lot. I did there were a few years where I did like maybe 20 in a year, which is a lot. There's a few motivating factors, right? One of them is money. Another one is talking to people and hearing their stories about the film. I was in this movie 50 years ago now. It feels weird to say it. That was 9 weeks of work that I did. It was done. I'm still talking about it. You're still interested in it. So are the people that came up to to my desk. They all have different stories to tell. Some of them very personal, some of them very touching, about what it meant to them. Beyond it was my favorite movie. Sometimes it's, I was stuck in this place and we only had 2 videos. So we watched it during a long illness, I watched it, or, the person that's no longer here that they used to watch it with, or, people have tattooed my image to their arm, or, and on, right? So that's definitely interesting to hear from people how it affected them. It's fun to sit next to, Darth Vader on my left and the holodoc on my right, or Data or whomever. It's fun to have Data, and by that I mean Brent Spiner, come up and say, "Oh, Paris, I'm such a fan," and I'm like, "Wow, you're a geek icon, and you're telling me you're like me. That's cool, right?" There's travel again, right? There's national travel instead of international travel, mostly, although I did do some in England. There's a lot to like about it. If you compare it to digging ditches, right? Right? I mean, it's a fine job. You go, and the challenge is, frankly, making it all sound fresh again every time somebody asks you the question. Actually, I'm thinking now of Biff from Back to the Future. Stop asking me the question. You know about that?
Yes, I do.
He wrote a song on the subject. Stop asking me the question, right? So that's the downside, maybe, is the fact that you're sort of grinding your gears over the same stretch.
Mm-hmm.
But then it becomes an acting problem at that point. How do you make the person feel as if you've never been asked this question before? So, to tell you the truth, I'm doing it with you. You know what I mean? It's like that's the truth of it, right? I mean, that's the experience of being somebody who does a lot of Comic-Con. Now, if you're someone who has a new project every year and you're doing the press junket because this year this is the thing that you're pushing, and now you have a whole new set of co-stars to discuss and a whole, that makes it easier. But in my case, where I peaked as an 11-year-old and I did this thing that has now become so iconic, it's like being a comedian having to do the same material over and over again. So
Right.
anyway, it's good and it's bad, but yeah, lately I haven't been doing that much of it, to tell you the truth.
In going through your interviews, I know that you would even reference the fact that people are always asking you, so what was Gene Wilder like? And I'm like, well, everyone says great things about him, so I'm pretty sure he was nice. But
He was nice.
Yes, but I was curious if in working with him, was there any little tidbits of wisdom that you got from that experience that you then carried with you, whether in navigating show business or just navigating life in general?
Yes, but not the sort of thing that I could then say, and then he said to me this, or then he said to me that. Anytime that you're an actor and you're working with another actor who is as good as he is, you are getting the benefit of that. It's a master class, right?
Right.
So, and it makes it easier on the day. You're in the boat. You've already been shown a bunch of shocking images and flashing lights, and now Gene has the task where he's supposed to make you feel like you're creeped out or whatever, and look what he does, right? Contrast that to what a bad actor might have done with it. It's a lot easier to give them what they want, which is this that I'm doing in the boat, right? Because I've got Gene, right? You're looking at him in a fascinated way. So, not just Gene, I mentioned Hal Linden and some other people that I've worked with. When you get to work with these people who are that good, it does inform your craft, if nothing else. I don't know. I think it would be more of a stretch to say that he informed who I am as a person, because I only spent 9 weeks with him and it was a long time ago. But certainly, it's not much of a stretch to say that the time I spent working with him, again, I'm not doing it that much these days, but it made me a better actor at the time, I'm sure.
Yes, well, post Willy Wonka, in addition to doing acting, you did a number of other things. You've done voiceover work, writing, you've been a PA, an AD. So did you originally approach the entertainment industry with more of an ambitious approach, or did you intentionally pursue this more multifaceted show business experience?
At the time, I was sure I was an actor for, age 6 to through college. And then because I started so early, I wanted to, it was suggested to me by my acting teachers, actually, that I stop acting for a little while and go live life. And that's where the travel kicked in for me. So, and then, this turn led to that turn, to the other turn, and I just sort of wandered further and further away from it. Production, I didn't start. It was just one of those sort of reinvention of myself. The first time I was doing it, I worked on a Woody Allen movie called Crimes and Misdemeanors. And then I was doing some commercials in New York. I did a Wim Wenders movie in San Francisco called Until the End of the World. I think it was called something to the end of the world. I want to say it was called Until the End of the World. I worked on The Doors with Val Kilmer, and I worked on a lot of movies. So anyway, then I stopped, and I don't even remember why I stopped. I think, oh, I know. So the next thing I did, I was in San Francisco. I was working in film production, and then I got an interview at Walt Disney Imagineering in LA. And so I went on a series of interviews for that. And I moved from San Francisco to LA, and I was an Imagineering for a couple of years. I was what they call the show systems manager. And I was working on the show aspects of rides and attractions, mostly a little bit in Disneyland and Disney World, but mostly for Euro Disney in France. And the next time I came back to production was not that many years ago. I moved back to New York because I was trying to sweep my now wife off of her feet and bring her back to LA, but I needed to do something. And the thing is, I've had all these careers, and every time you have a career, you have all of those skills to draw on in the future. So if you do this for 3 years and that for 3 years and this for 3 years, and eventually, anytime you have to do a new task or a new career, a new career choice, you can just draw on all those old things. So at that time, I was like, well, what am I going to draw on? I'll go and do some background work and draw on my acting skills. And I'll also do some production work because I remember when I did that in the 90s, I guess it was. So I didn't have major technical skills to be, let's say a camera op or something like that. So the production path was a natural path for me. And what's the starting place for that? PA. So as a result, I'm in my 50s. I'm now the oldest PA in New York, right? All the PAs are just out of film school. They're 19, they're 22, whatever it is. They're trying to make a career in film. And I'm already 50 something. And my thought was, I'm going to be a PA. I'm going to get my 250 days as a PA and be an AD. You're right. I did do some days as an AD, but never as a union, like end of the 250 days official DGA AD. I never did that, right? Because it's a lot of work, as you may know if you're in production. I don't know. I know you're a journalist, but you may also have feet in the production world. It's 14-hour days. They're long days. Your feet hurt. Your sleep schedules are disrupted. It's not unusual for you to come home, just go straight to bed, go to sleep, get some sleep, wake up, have to make that 6:30 a.m. call the next morning, and you're just going and going. And I really just basically started counting the number of usable hours I had left in my life versus how many days I wanted to be on set. Okay, I'm near the magic. That's good. I like that. But if I achieved my goal and became an AD, the pressure just ramps up. The hours just ramp up. Okay, you get paid more. But at some point, when you have enough money, you start making a decision to make that quality of life is more important necessarily than striving for success, kudos, wealth, fame, any of that. You start feeling like maybe and it's individual, not everybody feels this way, but for me, maybe the formula is make enough so that you're okay, so that the lack of money doesn't create unhappiness, and I guess enough notoriety so that your ego is sufficiently stroked, if you're looking at that continuum, right? But save enough time for yourself where you're doing the things you want to do. You're pursuing your hobbies, you're hanging out, you're spending time with your wife. My wife is younger than me, spend time with her. I won't say the cats. Now I'm getting a little bit too far, down the line, but I'm just saying that, like take time for yourself, solve for happiness. And so I stopped being in production.
Mm.
and I started doing other things. And yeah, so that's the
Yes,
answer.
because you have this very unique perspective of having been in the industry for that long and in different departments and over the course of many decades. So, in your experience and just with what you've observed, how do you think the entertainment industry has improved or perhaps in some ways worsened over the course of the, I guess, 50 something years that you've been familiar with it?
Well, sure. As I said, I did step in and step out, so I wasn't there continuously. But you're right, I did visit other departments. I was a grip, I was in props, I was in lighting, I was in electrics. I was all around, and I did a variety of things. Um, the first answer that came to my head is really more of an answer as an end user and what's happened to television versus film, right? Because really, in my opinion, like, I'm not somebody who's big on sitcoms. There are sitcoms that are so good that I will want to watch them over the course of, what I'll call history. I think of things like I Love Lucy, MASH, Cheers, Frasier, Friends. I didn't watch all of them, but I mean, that was clearly, they carved a pretty good niche. Seinfeld. So, but I'm counting on, like, two hands, the ones that I did feel sort of rose to that level. There was a lot of schlock that accompanied all of that in it. For me, again, these are my opinions. You're asking for my opinions in the sitcom world, let's say, right? So in a sense, and now I'm thinking about how MASH was sort of a dramedy, but okay, I won't digress. So in a sense, film was really the place that you went for high quality entertainment. Again, in my opinion, with some exceptions. I didn't even talk about drama on TV. I'm sure I could give you a list of those, but that shifted, right? And I guess this is not news to anybody this is the golden age of TV, right? What's happened is the biggest names decided that it was okay to do TV around the same time that is The Sopranos a good sort of benchmark for when things started coming up? Maybe a little before that. I think there were some things just pre-Sopranos, but there's this shift now. And so one big difference in the entertainment industry is TV and the place that it holds, streaming TV certainly, and that kind of TV versus what it used to be. TV used to be very much for the masses, and film was more of an arty kind of a milieu. There were bad movies made also, obviously, so there's exceptions to everything that I'm saying. So that's a big shift, I think. In terms of the quality of production, as it relates to me, I think they were playing pretty fast and loose with child safety laws around Willy Wonka, in the sense that they were putting us in some pretty precarious situations. I would cite things like Augustus diving into a real 1 meter wide hole in the chocolate river, and the rest of it was just this deep, right? And he had to hit that hole or be damaged. Veruca having to literally drop from 7 feet high onto some cardboard boxes and make sure she kept her arms pinned to her side so she didn't hurt herself as she, I mean, I'm sure they did safety meetings and that kind of stuff, which for anybody who doesn't know, that's my point, I guess. Like, for sure, these days, you are running through that stuff with a stunt guy, a stunt coordinator. They're being very careful. They're maybe digitizing some of this stuff to make sure that there's no question. I mean, you can never be 100% sure that your actor is going to be safe, but now on set, there are absolutely, so safety, that's a big difference. Just the fact that they're digitizing so much now more than they were. They were using more practical effects back then. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I like practical effects myself. I think there's probably places where both are good. There are places where digitizing is distracting. I have opinions on everything. So everything I say, I'm going to give you my opinion.
Well, and it's also interesting because I read in a Q&A, or maybe I forget which one it was, but that there were contracts in the industry that got signed after you did your contracts for Willy Wonka, so you don't get
Yeah.
as many royalties as some people would assume that you would get, which I think is always an interesting thing to observe if you follow kind of the film and television industry and the history of like different policies, because the markets always
Yes.
evolve. And so then like you constantly have to make new deals, because like streaming platforms didn't exist however many years ago. And
Right.
yeah.
That's true. Now, this is less about film production and more about the business of film. But what you're saying is true. That the phrase is that the agreement between the signatory producers and SAG, that is to say, there was a group of producers who all signed an agreement with SAG, was signed something like 6 months after we signed our contract in 1970, late 1970. So they probably signed that agreement sometime in 1971. And that would have protected us in the sense that we would have been paid, rather than what actually happened to us, which is we were paid royalties for network viewing of the film. So every time they showed it on network, I got royalties. And in fact, if it's shown on ABC, CBS, and NBC now, I get a check now, 50 years later. It comes in the mail. It's not, if they show it 3 times during that quarter, I'll probably make $120 or something like that. So it's not a lot of money, but it's free money, right? It comes in the mail. Boom, it's manna from heaven. But Willy Wonka, the Chocolate Factory was one of the best-selling VHSs, DVDs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not to mention cable, et cetera. So certainly there's a lot of money that I didn't make. That was never something that any of us sued about. It was just sort of the way that it was. And it's not something that's particular to Willy Wonka.
Right.
It was us and everything that was made prior to that date. What makes it sting a little bit is that the time frames of the two of the
so close.
so close, it's that kind of thing. But obviously Willy Wonka has been a majorly positive influence in my life. So I'm not so bitter about that it poisons my view of having been in Willy Wonka or anything. But since you're asking about it, that's the long version of that.
So we just have a couple of minutes left. Were there any tidbits you would like to share about the film's director? Because I think everybody always asks you about Gene, and I'm kind of going, okay, but a lot of times on a set, the director is the captain of the ship.
Sure. Well, that's true. So Mel Stewart's no longer with us. He made a brilliant film. He was also irascible. He was yelly. Excuse me. He was a little bit perfectionist in a sort of a Kubrick-like way. He was not afraid to do many takes. I have a slate from Not to Your 12th Son where we did 46 takes. I have a picture of that slate. So there was a joke because we were in Germany. Noch einmal, it means one more time. So we said noch einmal, which means one more time, right? So Mel Stewart, he was a little perfectionist. He was yelly. I think there was at one point where the crew walked off. I was like, come on, this is too long, too much, or something like that. I just have a vague memory of it. And one of the other Wonka kids mentioned it at one point. So I'm sure it's true. He was a good director. I was, believe it or not, at 11, going to him for direction and saying, what do you think, Mike? I wouldn't do it all the time, but like I would pick my spots. And if I felt like I needed to know what I'm doing in the scene, and, I actually would be an actor and I would say, okay, Veruca's going down the chute. Do I like it? Do I, what do I think? Just basic stuff. And he told me, he gave me clear answers and he told me, and he directed me. So I like to think we did a good job together, he and I. He certainly did a great job on the film. And those are my impressions of Mel.
Well, Paris, thank you so much for your time. It's been really interesting to get to hear your perspective on Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, as well as just your life and your work experience in general. I really enjoyed having this conversation with you.
Thank you. My pleasure, and nice to meet you as well.